It is winter 1985 in Washington state. The forests are dense, the mountains are snow-capped, and many families head out to cut down their own Christmas trees. 21-year-old Diana Robertson also sets out with her boyfriend Mike Reamer and her 2-year-old daughter Crystal. A few hours later, little Crystal is found alone in front of a shopping center. When asked where her mother is, she just keeps repeating, "Mommy is in the trees."
In the mid-1980s, Diana Robertson lives in Puyallup, Washington with her boyfriend, Mike Reamer, and their young daughter, Crystal. Nature plays a major role in her daily life. Diana was raised to view physical labor as a given, as was her partner, Mike. He works as a roofer and earns extra money during the winter months as a trapper in the remote forests surrounding the small town of Mineral. For work, he often has to drive for hours out to the most remote areas. Diana and Mike have known each other since school and have been a couple for several years. Friends and family members later describe the relationship as intense and passionate, but also as increasingly strained. Mike is considered impulsive, quick-tempered, and hot-headed. People close to him later report that he is said to have suffered from bouts of depression. In October 1985, a documented incident of domestic violence finally occurs. Diana subsequently obtains a restraining order prohibiting Mike from contacting her. Despite this, the two get back together a few months later. Diana primarily takes care of their daughter while Mike works. Their acquaintances describe Diana as a loving, rather reserved young woman. Her daily life unfolds within a small, unchanging radius. She usually stays in their shared apartment or accompanies Mike into the surrounding woods. Diana hopes that they can overcome the difficult times and become a happy family. But this hope will soon be shattered. On the morning of December 12, 1985, Diana, Mike, and their 2-year-old daughter Crystal set out on an outing together. They plan to cut down a Christmas tree and then check the traps Mike has set up in the wooded area near the small town of Mineral. Around 7 a.m., they get into Mike's red pickup truck and set off. They drive along remote roads deeper and deeper into the county's forested areas. Around 8 a.m., Mike makes a brief stop at his father's house. Mike's father offers to make them breakfast, but Mike declines. He seems rushed and says they need to keep going. It is the last time anyone sees the small family. What happens after this visit remains unclear for a long time. It is only a photo that brings greater attention to the case. It shows little Crystal alone in front of a supermarket in Spanaway, about an hour away from the wooded area her parents had set out for with her that morning. Store employees discover the child in front of the building in the early afternoon. She is dressed warmly, but no one is with her. The child appears exhausted, slightly confused, and can neither say her name nor explain why she is alone. After the photo of the child is published, her grandmother comes forward. She picks up Crystal and, together with the authorities, tries to find out what might have happened to Diana and Mike. When asked about her mother, Crystal responds with just one sentence: "Mommy is in the trees." As early as the evening of December 12th, Diana's mother and Mike's father had reported the two as missing after the family failed to return home. The police immediately begin searching for them. Several helicopters fly over the forested areas, patrol cars check roads and parking lots, and volunteers comb the terrain on foot. But winter complicates the search. Soon after, it begins to snow, which covers all traces and makes it even harder to find one's way in the dense forest. The search remains unsuccessful for weeks. Mike is considered to know the area well, and his family is convinced that he would have been able to protect his partner and child in an emergency. Nevertheless, no trace of them can be found. It is not until February 18, 1986, more than 2 months later, that a hiker makes a shocking discovery. Just a few meters off a remote forest road, partially covered by snow, lies the body of a young woman. The scene at the discovery site is disturbing. Near Scape Creek Road, Diana Robertson lies partially undressed in the snow. Her upper body shows a total of 17 stab wounds. There is no clear evidence of a struggle that can be definitively established later. Her hands are tied behind her back, and a white knee-high sock, knotted several times, is wrapped around her neck. Investigators later conclude that this was used to restrain Diana and render her unable to move. Overall, it appears as though the perpetrator acted in a deliberate and planned manner, rather than Diana having been a random victim. Just a few meters from where she was found stands Mike's red pickup truck. At first glance, the vehicle appears unremarkable, but inside, investigators discover traces of blood on the front seat. An envelope lies on the dashboard. Written on it in handwriting are the words, "I love you, Diana." The envelope is unopened and empty. Diana's mother later explains that the handwriting is Mike's. However, after a handwriting comparison, this cannot be confirmed beyond a doubt. The police are certain that Diana was the victim of a violent crime, but there is no trace of the possible perpetrator. There are no witnesses, no usable clues pointing to a third person, and Mike Reamer remains missing. Investigators therefore face the question early on of whether Mike himself killed Diana, or whether both were victims of an unknown perpetrator. The documented case of domestic violence just a few weeks earlier serves as incriminating evidence for them. From the investigators' perspective, it points to a possible motive and inevitably places Mike in the spotlight of the investigation. At the same time, however, there are also clues that point in a different direction. Just a few months earlier, another couple had disappeared in the same region. Stephen Harkins and Ruth Cooper were found shot to death weeks after their disappearance, and when Ruth Cooper was found, she also had a sock around her neck, tied in a similar knot to Diana's. Investigators consider it entirely possible that an unknown perpetrator is lurking in the region's forests and specifically targeting couples. Nevertheless, suspicion continues to fall on Mike. He could have killed Diana and then fled or taken his own life. Leaving Crystal alone at the supermarket could have been an attempt to at least ensure her survival. But without a body, a suicide note, or clear evidence, this theory cannot be confirmed. The search for Mike remains unsuccessful. Months pass without any new leads, and eventually, those months turn into years and then even decades. It wasn't until 2011, more than 25 years later, that a crucial discovery was made. Phil Reynolds and his neighbor were walking near a plot of farmland in the woods that belonged to Phil. His neighbor spots a large rock and tries to kick it out of the way. But when he takes a closer look, he realizes it is a human skull. Scattered around it are other bones, remnants of clothing, and a rubber boot. Forensic examinations confirm shortly thereafter that the remains are those of Mike Reamer. His remains were found only about 1.5 kilometers from where Diana's body was discovered, in an area that had already been searched multiple times by search parties. The pace of death can no longer be determined with certainty. Mike's skull has a large hole in the side, possibly caused by a gunshot or blunt force trauma. The discovery makes it clear that Mike did not run away at the time. He died in the same forest, presumably on the same day as Diana. Although some investigators believe this would point to an unknown third perpetrator, the majority still do not rule out Mike as the perpetrator at the time. Unfortunately, time and the changing conditions in the forest have destroyed many traces. However, it would still remain unclear how Crystal got to the supermarket, which was 50 kilometers away. If Mike were the perpetrator, he would have had to murder Diana, drive Crystal to the supermarket, and then return to the woods. On the other hand, a stranger would likely have had no reason to let her live. She herself doesn't know how she ended up there that day. A witness claims to have seen a red truck in the parking lot in front of the supermarket that evening, after Crystal was found. So one could also speculate that Mike dropped Crystal off in the parking lot first thing that morning, even before they drove into the woods. Perhaps he told her that Mom and Dad were going to the woods, which young children might colloquially refer to as in the trees, rather than in the forest. The question remains, if so much points to him as the perpetrator, why would he go to the trouble of tying a stocking around Diana's neck, thereby steering the investigation toward an unknown killer? That might even mean that Mike himself is this unknown killer. But these are all just speculations. Despite new investigative methods and repeated forensic analyses, which included attempts to recover DNA from evidence, the case has still not been definitively solved. It remains unclear whether Mike is the killer or whether he himself was merely the victim of an unknown perpetrator. Crystal, who had to grow up without her parents, has only a few memories of the day that changed her life forever. The sentence she uttered back then has remained etched in the minds of her loved ones to this day. Mommy is in the trees. That brings us to the end of today's video. The case of Diana Robertson and Mike Reamer remains unsolved to this day. Despite many investigations, numerous search operations, and years of speculation, it has never been conclusively determined what really happened on that December day in 1985. What do you think happened? Was Mike the perpetrator? Or were the two victims of an unknown assailant who was never caught? Or do you have a completely different theory? Feel free to share your thoughts on the case in the comments, and please support this channel. If a video gets a lot of engagement shortly after it's uploaded, it'll be recommended to people who haven't subscribed to Insolita yet. Other than that, there isn't much else to say. I hope you're having a good morning, afternoon, or evening, whichever time you're watching this, and I hope to see you again in the next video. Until then, ciao everyone, see you next time.